Well, we also watched NWO The Revolution. This was, as we pointed out, a coverage of legitimately one of the biggest angles of all time in 60 minutes, which is not much time to talk about a 4-year story.
60 minutes.
Really more than that, because they went back to the days of Jim Crockett selling it to Turner.
Kind of.
I guess just to mention, I
They
think
glossed over that entire thing in 1 minute.
They specifically wanted to mention, I think, just that, quote, Jim Crockett's mismanagement caused the sale to Turner. I think they just wanted to stick it to him.
Basically what happened. The thing about this DVD is I've seen a lot of WWE history DVDs, and a lot of them are just completely full of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I mean, there were some things where I was baffled at what people said. But it wasn't like a terribly historically inaccurate DVD.
No.
But I was just amazed at some of the things that they found important and some of the things that they did not mention at all. Like, was there any mention whatsoever of Bill Goldberg?
Not of his name. They showed him a few times.
That's kind of an important cog in this wheel, I would think.
Well, it's not a history of WCW.
Well,
It's history of the NWO. And no, there was no mention of the Georgia Dome and Hulk Hogan or any of that.
yeah.
No. It was very. They glossed over or just flat out left out a lot of stuff. It was a very shallow look at the NWO, and I did not just write a book on the company, so my memory about it is not as fresh as you. But I was watching every week at the time. I don't think I learned anything from this. Certainly, I don't think they got anything. 90% of it was accurate, or at least close enough. Really. So I guess I would summarize this as just kind of, unless you had never seen any of this before and wanted to check it out, frankly, it was pretty pointless.
Yes.
It was inoffensive and pointless. So they talked about Hogan jumping to WCW, and their interviews, by the way, a few of them were done specifically for this DVD, but many of them were taken from other interviews going back at least a decade, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
So they had Vince saying that Hogan's acquisition made WCW actual competition, and Bischoff saying Dallas Page was the one who told him Scott Hall's contract was running out, and they had DDP as the liaison because legally Hall couldn't directly negotiate at that time. And Nash heard about Hall's WCW deal, got jealous, asked Vince for some kind of a guarantee, and Vince couldn't do it, so Nash left too. Showed Scott Hall's debut on Nitro, and I had forgotten this. He was wearing not an acid wash jeans, but very light blue jeans and a matching denim vest.
Yeah.
Hall said that at the time, he thought he was just selling out. He didn't think he was going to have any fun. He just was going to make money and have a job, but it turned out, he was surprised at how well it all worked out.
This struck me as, I think the interview where Hall was talking about this was right after he got brought back to WWE.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it was.
I didn't buy a word of what he said. Not a word of it. You went there not expecting anything to happen? Really? Like, you went there and you didn't... I just didn't buy any of it. I didn't buy any of it.
I guess I can see either way. They were phasing him out. He was on his way down in WWE for sure. So maybe he thought his own star had faded.
No, but just the idea that when he went to WCW would be like, I didn't expect anything to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, really? You thought they were going to pay you all that money and just you'd be a guy? I mean, come on.
I don't know. Well, weren't a lot of guys making money just to be a guy in WCW?
Not at that time. That was later.
I see. We got comments from Billy Kidman, who is not in prime fighting shape. Showed Nash powerbombing Bischoff off the table.
Off the stage.
Off the stage through a table. I was 21 when this happened and horrified. And I thought maybe he might not walk again. In hindsight, this is such clearly a gimmick spot.
Of course.
It's a table on a giant crash pad. Dusty Rhodes told us that sometimes in this business, change is a very good thing.
Ha!
Ironic.
Of all people.
Of all people and for all companies.
Yeah.
Got to the Bash at the Beach match. Cody was 11 years old at the time.
Cody Rhodes, everybody.
Cody was actually awesome on the show.
When I first saw that they had interviewed Cody Rhodes, I was like, hold on a second. You have chosen Cody Rhodes. Nothing against Cody Rhodes, but again, he was 11 during all of this. So what the hell could he possibly add to this? Well, as it turns out, he's the son of Dusty Rhodes. And so,
as it turns out, yes.
He was also a big wrestling fan. And so he was constantly calling his father, finding out what the hell was going on. And as it turns out, his father would often kayfabe him.
Yes.
With fake medical reports about how the WCW guys like Rey Mysterio had been injured after being lawn darted into the side of a trailer.
He gave his 11-year-old son dire news about Rey Mysterio's condition.
Yes. Cody was just like a mega fan.
Yeah.
And he was getting like a little bit of inside information. Mm-hmm. But he actually added a lot to this DVD.
And he took a lot of grief on the playground for being a mega fan and for being Dusty Rhodes' kid. They showed Hogan walking down to the ring and all the commentary. They edited out Bobby Heenan's line asking whose side he was on. Then they showed Hogan jumping for the leg drop, and then they went to a still shot.
Yeah. You got to buy the other DVD or something.
I guess. They can't show... perhaps Randy Savage's head exploded. They couldn't show that on this. So Jimmy Hart noted that Hogan had been getting more and more boos from the crowd. They were... the fans who grew up with him were now grown up, were kind of tired of his act. So it was the right time for the turn. Hogan explained that the NWO worked because he was its leader, and that actually was not as egotistical as it sounds, because he pointed out that he had been the flag bearer for the other company for so long that the WCW fans, a lot of them, naturally hated him. Vince Russo appeared on TV. I didn't need that. So everyone jumped on board. They got DiBiase and the Giant. Nash called him Paul twice tonight. I've had to deal with people calling the Big Show Paul. Six joined on. Vincent, Eric Bischoff himself. DiBiase pointed out they hired him to be the mouthpiece. Then Bischoff saw it catching fire, hitched his own wagon to it, and that made DiBiase completely useless. Joe Hennig was on this for a little bit. Actually, a lot later. Nash talked about, and you got mad at him here, and I got what he was saying. He did a poor job of explaining himself. Their vision for the NWO was that everyone, well, for many years they've been Hulk Hogan shouting about the training, the training, the prayers, and the vitamins, and Ric Flair talking about styling and profiling. For many, many years in wrestling, it had been a circus, and he wanted it to be more realistic with himself and Scott Hall coming off as just normal humans. So they go to cut these vignettes, and Hulk Hogan just goes into Hulk Hogan mode. And he's the carny, and he's talking about, he's just being Hulk Hogan. And Nash thought it was a complete disaster. And then one of the tech guys edited it down, threw in a million sound effects, got the porno music in there, and made it in black and white, and they turned out to be great vignettes.
What did I get mad about?
Nash's explanation for this.
No, I was confused at the time. That's all it was.
Well, you were confused. Nash did a poor job of explaining it.
I see.
Yeah. They could have used a second take on this interview. Matt Stryker was all over this DVD. He is incapable of speaking without sounding like he's cutting a promo. And not a very good one.
He comes off so completely, how can I say this?
Rehearsed?
No, like sometimes he comes off as like a really passionate, knowledgeable fan. Mm-hmm. And sometimes he just comes across as like completely insincere.
Yeah, he comes across like a WWE talking head.
And I think the problem is I've known people that remind me a lot of Matt Stryker, and they just annoy you. You know what I mean? Even when they're really nice and they mean well. And they actually are sincere, but they're so annoying. And that is the vibe that I really got from Matt Stryker here on this DVD. It kind of I can kind of understand why a lot of announcers, look at how long Josh Matthews has been around. And a lot of these guys, I mean, if they just kind of do their job and they don't stick out and they just do what they're told, they can have a job in WWE forever. But Matt Stryker, his problem was he was too big a fan, and I think that he just wanted to just be a part of everything. And he had to it just like everything he did got out of control. And I can understand why they were just like, all right, let's get rid of this guy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sure, he's a nice guy, huge wrestling fan, but just watching this DVD, it was like, I get why this guy didn't have a long and storied career in WWE.
Yeah, everything he said sounded, like I said, rehearsed, or like he wanted everything he said to be grandiose. And it's like, just relax and be a normal human.
Yes. Sometimes you can make things grandiose, but sometimes when things aren't grandiose, you sound like an idiot when you try to make them sound grandiose.
Yes. So they showed a bunch of B-teamers joining the NWO, like Buff Bagwell and Michael Wall Street and Big Bubba and the Nasty Boys, which I have literally zero memory of. Showed 1 million NWO attacks and the Rey Mysterio lawn dart spot. And Bischoff talked about people in Orlando who watched this on TV and then called 911 to report gang fights.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part where Cody talked about Cody talked about his dad kayfabe him on Rey's status.
That's right.
He also said that this is the point in his life when suddenly it became cool to be the son of a wrestler on the playground and cool to be the wrestling fan. And Curtis Axel showed up again, said his high school softball team named themselves after the NWO. A bunch of guys talked about how the NWO was very realistic, especially compared to what had been going on. You know, before this, you had in WCW, you had things like the Dungeon of Doom, or as Big Show referred to it, the crap I have been involved with prior.
Yes.
And, you know, they had the Godwins and Teal Hopper over on Raw.
When him and the Yeti double humped Hulk Hogan.
That would qualify. That would qualify.
He'll never live that one down.
Nor should he. They spent way too much time. They had an incident on Nitro where it was a Piper Hogan match, and they were showing a replay of the finish, and suddenly the finish went away, and they said Bischoff was in the truck taking the tape away. They showed this whole segment in real time, like a minute solid. That was dumb.
I think this might have been, what's funny is I just, like I said, just turned in the manuscript today, going over all this stuff, and there was stuff watching this DVD that's just like, I have absolutely no idea what's going on right now. You know what I mean? Like, trying to fit this whole thing into 1 hour, it was like everything was so choppy, everything was so cut up. Like, what the hell was this? I think this was the time that they had a Roddy Piper Hulk Hogan match, and they never bothered to advertise it was non-title, including the day of the show, so that when Roddy Piper beat him with a sleeper, everybody thought it was a title change, at which point they then announced that it was a non-title match, if I recall correctly. But anyway, the point is, I think that was the match, and I guess the next night, Bischoff just didn't want to show anybody that Hogan had lost, even non-title. I'm pretty sure that's what this was, but they absolutely did not explain it at all.
And it was so completely irrelevant.
No, it had nothing to do with anything.
Nothing to do with anything. It led nowhere. It was just 1 minute on the 60-minute DVD of Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko, hands to their headsets, saying, "What's going on? What's in the truck?"
1.8% of the story was this. And I have no idea what the point was.
Yeah. Thank you for doing the math on that.
In my head.
All right. They talked about wanting the NWO to actually be its own company. Eric wanted it to have its own show. That meant they needed to have an entire roster of wrestlers, and so they added everyone. Lex Luger said it was very cool when they were a small exclusive club, and then they got watered down.
You don't say.
That is a fact. That is a fact.
I actually kind of feel a little bit of sympathy for Eric Bischoff in the sense that the NWO actually was really super hot. And it was so hot that it's like the storyline should have been that they come in, they take over, they get vanquished.
Yeah.
But it was like such a big deal that I'm sure in his brain he was like, I can't vanquish these guys. I'm making all this money. And he could not for the life of him come up with any way to salvage everything, but still somehow beat the NWO and have WCW come out victorious. And that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, somebody actually mentioned that later. Dusty talked about the time he joined the NWO. Cody had no idea what was going to happen. He's watching his dad on TV, and suddenly his dad attacks Larry Zbyszko.
Yes.
And pulls off the black shirt. He had no idea what was going on. And Cody's mom made Dusty call him and explain things.
Cody said, I was so mad I spit.
Yes. That is awesome. That's fantastic. Curtis Axel talked about watching his dad in the NWO. Said it was, his dad got to hang out with his high school buddy Rick Rude, making a lot of money, having the time of their lives on the show. They would watch it together. They would laugh at it. They would rewind. All was well in the world. Luger again talked about how it would have been nice if there had been a little bit more exclusivity.
No mention, by the way, that Rude and Kurt Hennig both have since passed away.
No?
Probably in some part due to the excesses of the time period.
Well, I think the fun they were having, yes. Nor Bryan Adams or anyone else on this.
Half the roster.
Yeah. So, Booker did say that he was one of the very few guys who they came to him and said, we want to put you in the NWO, and he said no, because he could see where this is going. NWO sold out happened. Nash called it one of the stupidest things he'd ever seen. It was
true.
It's a. Didn't we review it once? I've seen it. It's a bad show, and it was very stupid. And as Nash pointed out, it's their promotion with their referees. Why would they ever lose a match?
Yep,
but they did. He said that was when he knew why they had been a second-rate company forever, and he said that was the point where he stopped caring about anything besides his paycheck.
Well, he gave up quick.
Year and a half.
Come on, dude.
In his defense, his paycheck was awfully large. Talked about Sting, how he had been the one guy who had never jumped ship and had been a good guy essentially forever. Luger was not on this DVD much, but everything he said was a good point, even if it was obvious. He talked about how Sting's change from the colorful surfer guy to the guy dressed in black and white was Sting going into mourning for the company he had always known.
That's right. And copying the Crow. Also
copying the Crow. He didn't mention that part. He found a more clever way to say he was copying the Crow. They showed him coming down from the ceiling a bunch. They showed him something I had completely forgotten. Sting rappelled to the ring from a helicopter.
Yeah.
Wow. They showed an incredibly heavily edited version of Sting winning the title from Hogan. No mention of Bret Hart. No mention of the false finish in the middle of the match.
That's still one of the great mysteries of that time period. That I don't know if we'll ever get an answer to what the hell happened there. But they spent an entire year building up that Sting was going to be the savior of WCW. And he was going to face and win the title from Hulk Hogan at Starrcade. It did their biggest buy rate of all time. And in the match, first off, remember, Sting had been rappelling down from the rafters, getting a gigantic pop for a year. Mm-hmm. So at Starrcade here, he came down the ramp. What? That's the first problem. So then, in the match, Hogan just beat the shit out of him the whole time. And finally hits a leg drop and pins Sting.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
The ref counted smoothly and cleanly, and Sting was pinned.
Brett comes out, restarts the match, and they do what they do. And the idea was supposed to be that Nick Patrick was going to screw Sting and give him a fast count. But he didn't fast count him. And no one has any idea why he didn't fast count. And, people bring up, well, if you watch the match, Hogan and Nick Patrick had a conversation before it started. Was Hogan, doing whatever to make sure that he didn't count fast? What happened? Did they really screw Sting? What was the story? And all I know is that Nick Patrick's claim is that I thought it was a fast count.
I had not heard that.
Nick Patrick, referee extraordinaire for God knows how long, said, I thought it was a fast count.
Yeah, I don't believe him. I think he's lying.
Absolutely an amazing tale. And boy. And then, Sting was champion, but he was not the top guy afterwards. And the story of WCW.
Yeah, there's a lot here. A lot to talk about here. The whole point of the fast count thing was just to have Bret out there because they had just signed him after Montreal and needed some reason for him to come out.
Yes.
So the idea with that, you see, he's not going to let what happened to him happen to somebody else. But what happened was Sting got beat clean, and then Bret Hart inexplicably had the power to give him a second chance that he did not deserve. All getting off on the wrong foot. The other thing, and this was not on this DVD at all, but I have seen already Hulk Hogan interview in the year since, where he explained that he felt this was the wrong finish because the NWO was just starting to catch fire.
Oh, yeah.
Too early to pull the plug.
Sure.
Never mind that it went on for another decade anyway. So yes, there's a lot of lying going around. Talked about, I totally lost my place. Dennis Rodman arrived. Here he was, a star player on the best team in the NBA. This was actually the point. You mentioned when this started that this is all almost 20 years ago now. I thought, oh, that's true. When I remembered that Dennis Rodman has not been a prominent NBA player now for a decade and a half, that's when I felt very old. So Cody talked about how this again made wrestling cool and got them more mainstream coverage. Karl Malone tagged along, and DDP made sure he was involved in all of this.
You know, the whole thing with they spent so much time on Dennis Rodman. Mm-hmm. And like in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it was a big deal, but not Nick Patrick. I'm still thinking about Nick Patrick. Dennis Rodman, they did he had two big appearances. And the first one did really big, and the second one didn't at all. And the Jay Leno thing didn't mean a thing. And of course, the Arquette thing actually was a negative for business.
Well, they didn't mention Arquette here. But
all they do is talk about the mainstream. You know, and I don't know. To me, if you do something and the mainstream picks up on it, and then there is a subsequent increase in business in some way, then great. But if you do something and it gets a lot of publicity and there's absolutely zero benefit in any sector of business, or in the case of Arquette, everything is negative, then that's not something you should be crowing about. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's...
Wow, David Arquette got you coverage in USA Today.
They were being marks for themselves. They cared more about seeing their faces and their company mentioned on talk shows and whatever than about, making money.
Mainstream publicity is about improving your business. That's why you go for it. That's why you try to get it. You know, if you do something that the mainstream picks up on and then your business tanks, then you fucked up.
Cody said, by the way, this is a great use of, quote, real athletes. Because, wrestlers are fake. Arn Anderson said they would prostitute the entire company to get a celebrity involved. They went from there to the split between the NWO and the Wolfpack. Dusty said that was the beginning of the end of the whole thing because they made it just another wrestling angle. They showed a ton of NWO beatdowns. This was a badly edited segment because they would show a beatdown and it'd be like 98 or 99 when the Wolfpack was around, and then they go back to 96 and just jumping back and forth constantly. I had no idea what was happening. Big Show and Booker said the NWO had, or at least the top guys, they had creative control in their contracts, and that meant the end of the company was inevitable. Partly true. DeMott said the Stars left the NWO. It got passé. Show noted that
I should say about the contracts with the creative control. I don't know who did and who didn't, but I do know that near the end there were a lot of guys who didn't, and they still just did whatever the hell they wanted.
Yeah,
it didn't have anything to do with creative control. It was like if you didn't want to do something, you just didn't do it, or you went out and you did whatever the hell you wanted.
Scott Steiner.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Scott Steiner beating the hell out of people backstage, and he nearly killed Dallas Page, and, he was punished by being given the championship.
Yeah. So, Show noted that through all these years, everyone had joined the NWO and served their time there basically, and either stayed there in the watered down version or just filtered away. But they never bothered to make new stars on the WCW side. Talked about how the last days of the it's actually funny. They had everyone talking about how the last days of the NWO completely sucked, which is true. But the way it's just these guys could have been talking about really any version after about 1998 or so. But they put all these sound bites of everyone saying this with tons of clips of Jeff Jarrett.
Yes.
Just a complete and utter burial.
Yes.
They took what everyone said and made it look like they were all blaming Jarrett for the demise. Whereas really, he was just there when it happened.
You know, they also had a Vince Russo quote. Vince Russo was on this DVD just like a couple of times. They didn't interview him about much, or maybe they did and they just used a couple of the things he said, but he had maybe 15 seconds of screen time.
That's about right.
In those 15 seconds, people always ask, like, why don't you... I remember when he did the kayfabe commentaries thing. Sean Oliver, in fact, was very upset with me that I didn't bother sending in any questions. How can you not send any questions? And it's like, dude, every Vince Russo interview is exactly the same. You ask him about anything, and he will say either one of two things. Bro, you're absolutely right. Or, bro, I had nothing to do with that. That is his answer to every last single solitary question. So, he didn't talk about much here, but one thing that he did talk about, it was classic Vince Russo. They asked him about something or other, and he said that in order for this to work, we needed Bret Hart, and Bret Hart got hurt, and once Bret Hart was gone, there was no way this new NWO was going to work. It's like, what? Because you lost Bret Hart, your new NWO just absolutely could not work. It was impossible. That was it. That was his whole soundbite. But it was like every Vince Russo interview I've ever heard. Something went wrong, and thus it was impossible for it to work.
So the show had overstayed its welcome by this point. I know we talked about how it was hard to summarize 4 years and 60 minutes, but really this could have been done in 45. So Booker explained that, like we said, he was the one who said, the whole point of any story is that in the end, good should triumph over evil.
Simple, you'd think.
And in this story, good never triumphed over evil. That made the good guys uncool, and nobody cared about them.
Yeah, the NWO came in, they took over, and then the storyline was that WCW sucked.
And was incompetent.
And then WCW continued to suck until they were out of business.
Yes. That is accurate.
That is a simplistic version of the death of WCW, but that is in large part, and a lot of bad booking.
Yeah.
But it certainly didn't help that you told your viewers that this promotion sucked during the same time that WWE was rising.
Yeah. Yeah. So they glossed over the WWE version of the NWO. They showed clips of Hogan and Rocket Mania, including Hulk Hogan
inexplicably.
What's that?
Why? What was the point of that?
I don't know. I guess just to show that it happened. Rock and Hogan was a big match. It had...
The hell did it have to do with the NWO?
They wore T-shirts.
But he was Hollywood Hogan at the time?
They were selling T-shirts. Somebody said that. And I just want to bring it up. The only reason I brought it up was because they showed a clip of Hulk Hogan using a chokeslam. That was weird.
I remember that match because when it was over, there was massive debate. I think I actually gave that match 2-star ratings because...
Yes, some people thought it was the best thing ever, and some of us thought it sucked.
If you go by the reaction of the fans, how they react to that match, then yeah, it was like a 5-star match. If you turned down the volume or you just actually watched the match, it sucked! It was a bad match.
I forget where I was or who I was watching it with, but I was watching it. And there were many times throughout the match where I would note, boy, this crowd's going crazy, and the people in this living room are going nuts. Maybe I'm watching the wrong match here. Let me look closer, and no, this match blows.
No, it was just a lot of fun for the old Hulkamaniacs to see this reaction that he was getting, as a heel, mind you, in Toronto. And Yeah, but the match itself was really no good. It was a bad match.
So that was the show.
That was the end.
That was the end. I presume that if you buy the DVD of this, you get a bunch of matches.
You know what I pray? I pray that maybe 20 years down the road, when maybe they're 5 years old right now. I don't know. Some young fella. I just had a new kid that started in my jiu-jitsu class today. He's I can't remember how old he is, but he was born on September 8, 2001, a few days before 9/11. I was just like, God damn, I'm old. But anyway, I'm hoping that some 5-year-old kid today, in 20 years, is 25 years old, and he's told to go through the archives at WWE and put together a DVD, and on his bookshelf at home is a copy of the soon-to-be-released new and expanded edition of Death of WCW. And he reads through it, and he gets a good laugh out of the 2000 chapter, and he decides to put together a 3-disc Blu-ray set, or whatever, maybe it'll just be downloaded into your brain, a new collection based on 2000 WCW. That year was amazing, and not in a good way. This was not, oh my God, this is so funny. Oh my God, this year is such a classic year in pro wrestling. This was the worst ever. The worst year all time, anyone's life, anywhere in the recorded history of man, anywhere in the universe. The worst year for a pro wrestling promotion ever. They had shots of Jeff Jarrett on the DVD that we watched, trying to blame him or talk about what a fool he was or a failure or whatever. Man, Jeff Jarrett was a shining light in WCW in 2000 compared to the rest of this shit. It was such a horrendous year. 30,000 words I wrote about that year. And hopefully someday somebody can go through the WWE archives and just to Carnival music put together a history of that year. That is a year that should be treasured into perpetuity. The year 2000 in WCW. And they just didn't even talk about it here on this DVD. I couldn't even believe it. So there you go. What was it called again?
NWO The Revolution.
NWO The Revolution. 1 hour, everybody, on Netflix. I presume the DVD probably had a bunch of matches. Let me find out.
Just said that.
Oh, you did? I wasn't listening.
I didn't look it up, though, so you can't add to the show.
All right, I'm going to do that right now. WCW The Revolution. Can't find nothing.
NWO The Revolution.
Oh,
let me do this.
That might help. There we go. Amazon.com. It is apparently a multi-disc set.
$20.
$20. Oh, wow. The first review. NWO The Disappointment. That's the first guy says. 3-disc set. Yep, there we go. There's
listing.
The first disc appears to be the story.
Yeah.
And then they've got a bunch of different moments.
Yeah, the Bash at the Beach match on disc 2.
Yeah.
Giant versus Hogan, where Hogan regained the title. Outsiders versus Harlem Heat. 6 versus The Bounty Hunter. Oh, from Saturday Night. Okay, that would be awesome. That's one of the ones they did where they did the... it was an empty arena, and they were doing matches, and they would do commentary for their own matches. The one I'm thinking of is it was an outsider squash, obviously a squash match, and whichever guy was on the apron, we were doing commentary for the other. Those were funny. So you had the Outsiders versus the Steiners from Sold Out, ironically enough. Hogan versus Piper in the non-finish. Hogan and Rodman versus Luger and the Giant. A Las Vegas sudden death match between DDP and Randy Savage. Sting versus Hogan from Nitro. Hogan versus Savage from Nitro.
That must have been the day after Starrcade.
Probably, yeah. Sting versus the Giant for the tag team titles.
No, for control of the tag team titles.
I think they were the champions and then they broke up.
I don't even want to know.
Hogan and Bischoff versus Leno and DDP. The worst war games, I can't say one of the worst war games of all time. Team WCW versus Team Hollywood versus Team Wolfpack. I believe that's the one with the Ultimate Warrior.
Oh my God, where he appeared and disappeared in the smoke.
Yeah, and somebody, it wasn't that match, it was on that show where Davey Boy Smith took a bump on the trapdoor, I think.
That's right. Broke his back.
Goldberg versus Nash. Yes, that match.
Oh, God.
Goldberg versus Bret Hart, which I presume is also that match.
Yeah.
Then Hogan, Hall, and Nash versus The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, which actually, I'm sure it's not particularly good, but I think Dave said that's the only time Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan ever had a match together.
Yeah.
Which makes that almost must-see viewing. I'm sure it's just a big fight. And then a bunch of Blu-ray extras.
Including NWO Legends Wrestling Roundtable with Nash, Ross, J.J. Dillon, and Michael Hayes, which I'll bet was actually fascinating.
Yeah.
In a lot of different
ways.
Good
way to put it. And then apparently just a bunch of skits or a bunch of interviews they didn't use.
How about that? Well, there you go, everybody. Check it out.
This review that says, overall, looks like a good set if you're a fan of the faction. I don't expect matches to be good, considering most of them had run-ins.
There were a lot of run-ins.
In that era, yes.
That was the gimmick.
If you liked someone running in for a DQ, you missed your time.
Yeah. All right, everybody. That's it from here.